I have no memory of knowing how they met. I know all I heard was that Mammy played hard to get. And but Dad, he was really dapper, very dapper looking, with his, what is that hat that he had?
That's kind of a bowler, isn't it?
Yeah, he was very dapper. And he, after the railroad, I don't know what jobs he did have, but one of them during the Depression is he had a horse in, I don't know, it was a
Well, like a delivery wagon.
Yeah.
It was.
But he was driven by horses, and he worked for Armstrong Transfer, and I was just
hauling freight,
Yeah,
within the town.
Yeah, I was real little at the time, and that was something to have a horse, in the city. But that's what they did at that time. And then he eventually, during the Second World War, he worked for Northern Ordnance, along with my two brothers, my brother-in-law. They all worked at Northern Ordnance, and during the war. And so that was good for my dad. He made, good money for retirement. And Mom was a housewife, and she had a lot of friends. They played cards, and she entertained that way, and she loved gardening. She had a lot on the corner by her house that was owned by the city. No one built there. And the people enjoyed it so much, they would stop and look at her garden and talk to her, and how pretty it was to pass, the flowers and the vegetables and everything. So she thoroughly enjoyed that. And
she was also very active in that church, too,
Yeah.
St. Bridget's.
I think they related pretty good.
Yeah. Her dad was really a very gentle soul, and but they got along fine. And
Mother would take trips out east or out west to visit my sister. My sister that's 4 years older than me, Irene. She would go out there to visit, and Dad never wanted to take a train ride. He never went. Mother had made it a few times out there, and but yeah.
But we have great memories of bringing her down to the Milwaukee Depot.
Yeah.
And it's like the Milwaukee Depot today is where the ice rink is, and right off of Washington.
Yeah, I have pictures that we took, our movie pictures, the whole trip down as what we were passing. And then when we got there, there's pictures of me with that white hat on and holding one of our children and waving goodbye to her, which she loved. Yeah, she, there was times where things were hard for her, but she's not one that, shared it with people, because that was hers, and so she always was very pleasant and had a sense of humor, and it was just, in fact, I talked to my sister Irene. I says, you speak so fondly of her too, and I said, where do you come, with your feelings, and that same thing she said, that Mother had her issues, and health issues and what have you, but it wasn't something that she
never complained.
She brought out her sense of humor. I mean, that was the time to put it under wraps and just enjoy being with people, so, and that she did. She had some good neighbors that thoroughly enjoyed her, but then there was my dad. My Irene's husband taught me how to drive, and so I told my dad one day, I said, Dad, why don't you let me take the car out? And because John, showed me how to drive. So we got in his big car, and it was in the driveway, and so I backed up, and as I was backing up, I couldn't get the thing to stop, and so I went so far.
Reach the pedal.
I I went so far as to hit the curb across the street, and he turned to me and he says, "I thought you said you knew how to drive." I thought, oh.
Yeah, well, John never taught you how to back up.
Well, with Dad's car, it was an awfully big car. In fact, it was so big when I was a little kid, I used to get in the steering wheel and ride it, and Dad would, "No, Marianne, you can't do that because that'll loosen up the steering wheel." So he took my fun away.
Yeah. It was just one of those great big old Buicks.
Yeah, but, yeah,
That was back when everything was made of steel,
yeah,
not plastic.
yeah, he liked to putz in the garage and keep it clean. He had a
Yeah, that's right. He had a
They-
pit. He had a
yeah.
pit in the garage. Did all his own
Mom
work.
and Dad lived northeast before, and they bought a store in North Minneapolis, but they didn't operate it. The woman operated it, and so finally they decided to not have the store there anymore, and they converted it into a living quarters, and that's where I moved when I was in third grade. I moved there, and then I went to a parochial school, St. Bridget's at that time, and lived there. That was interesting.
They had a little screened-in
Oh, porch. Yeah.
porch type thing.
Well, it was mine.
freestanding, and
Oh, well, that was about 8 by 10.
yeah, big
But
enough
what
to-
it was is when we lived on 313 Southeast, it was a playhouse for us. And it had, a platform you'd put out and you could step up into it, and where the wheels were, because you could pull it, was a bench, and we had our little toy furniture and everything in there. Well, then when they moved to the north, that's where that store was, they took the wheels off and they turned it into a screened-in house. In the summers, they would sleep out there. It was cool, and it was a place to
back
just,
before air conditioning.
yeah, it was like a
Yeah.
detached porch. Well, the stories that they tell me when I was a little infant, and he would carry me around and show me all the pictures in the house, and he used to call me his little Harter. And Mother was always after him because he would get so close, and there I am, touching and readjusting pictures. She said, "Pa," she said, "back up." But, he was a good dad. I mean, he was gentle, He worked hard. And like I say, he went through the Depression, and we always had food, fruit and vegetables and food, and no matter what. I mean, he didn't overspend to, give the things that we really, really needed. He used to even buy a turkey and put it in his garage and fatten it up for Thanksgiving. But
But then they'd kill off your ducks.
we had a pet duck that when I walked to school, we had a long driveway, and when I would walk to school, the duck would walk with me. And then when I got to the street, I'd tell him to go home, and then he'd go back walking, quack, quack, really disgruntled. We had to go back home. But my sister used to have him in the house, too. And my older sister, she's 15 years older, and when she was ironing, he would sit by her feet. And then when she'd go to put something someplace, he'd follow her around. So we didn't have dogs, we had ducks. She was a gentle soul. I mean, she carried her faith with her very strongly. And but she didn't. Irene mentioned that too today when I was talking to her. She said she didn't wear it on her sleeve, and she didn't try to even with the family. She didn't try to push you. Although Mom and I had gone to a couple of retreats, one in Duluth at St. Scholastica with a neighbor of ours. Her daughter was a nun, and that's where we got our short sheeted us, the nun did. And then we went to another one in Chaska, but the two of us went together, and that was lovely. But like I say, she didn't hammer it into us that what we had to believe or what we had to do, and she was real.
Yeah, well, she lived her religion, and you
Yeah.
watched it and
Mm-hmm.
copied it. You know, it was the way it was done.
Yeah.
Yeah, she. You're right. She was just a gentle person.
Mm-hmm. She lived with us before she went into a nursing home. And she told my brother-in-law one day, Joel, that's a crazy house. Because we had a bunch of teenagers, you know, and it was just a lot of commotion. And then she wasn't malicious when she said it. I mean, it just.
But, you know, she was quite old by that time,
Yeah.
and we didn't want her in the nursing home. We wanted her to be with us, and she was willing to try it. But
He had her name on the list at St.
St. Therese.
Teresa's, yeah.
Did she end up there from our place, or did she go to live with Margaret? And then
No. She
went
from
from
our
our-
house, she went
Okay.
there. And her sister ended up being there too, my Aunt Frances.